Senator Blunt, how you doing, friend?
I'm good. It's good to be with all of you here this morning. And you're talking about Glenn Campbell. On the healthcare research front, I do a lot of work there. It's the appropriating committee I chair. We've eliminated lots of programs to do more healthcare research, and Alzheimer's, unbelievably growing problem for individuals and families. And I was thinking this morning, in the year or so that he continued to perform after everybody knew he had Alzheimer's, how stressful that probably was for everybody. But when he got into the song, he was still Glenn Campbell, just like he'd always been.
Yeah, and you know what? That's one of those things. It still remains as much as highly developed a country as we are, and our sciences and everything else. It's still a mystifying disease.
It is, and a disease that, while terrible for the person that has it, but this is a disease that there's so hard on the people that care about people that have Alzheimer's, and it's costly. I was at Washington University yesterday. They believe they're on the edge of a blood test where you just take a blood test that would indicate the likelihood that this is going to be a problem. And if you can do things that just delay onset, one, you save a ton of money. Two, something else may happen to you first. I think he brought a lot of focus to this, and when you talk about this, it's hard to talk about this and not be talking to somebody who knows somebody who is every day affected by a mom or a dad that's now staying home because the other spouse has to have full-time care, kids who are in and out of their parents' house all the time, or then eventually you're visiting a memory care unit somewhere, and the person you care about so much doesn't know who you are. It's an insidious problem. Whatever we can do to find a solution there will be the right thing to do. And by the way, it'll save a lot of money too. We're spending $250 billion tax dollars a year right now on Alzheimer's-related care. That's half of the defense budget.
Right.
And the projection for 2050, 33 years from now, is if something doesn't change, we'll be spending $1.1 trillion of today's dollars, tax dollars, on Alzheimer's care. That's twice what we spend to defend the country every day.
Right. Speaking of defense, President Trump yesterday talking about North Korea. Here's what he had to say.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
And Rex Tillerson, Secretary of State, saying, yep, basically this is President Trump speaking in the language that Kim Jong-un understands. What's your take on that?
I agree with that. I actually don't fault the president on this, and I think the fact that he's willing to make a statement like that diminishes the likelihood that we'll have to deal with this problem in that way as opposed to some other way. This is what this guy understands. He is reckless. He has, had his brother killed, his uncle killed, has been very vicious with his own so-called inner circle, not to mention the absolute repression in the country. But he's reckless. I'm on the Intel committee. We deal with this. I don't think I'd be suggesting anything that shouldn't be suggested to say the last 6 months, probably not a topic we've talked about more than this, because it is concerning. These people have lied to 3 American presidents in a row and now have gotten to this point. And the message that the president sent was for him, but it was also for the neighborhood. And particularly, I think, for the Chinese, who should have been listening. And at some point, people in North Korea should be listening and figuring out just how dangerous this guy is to them as their leader, but I don't fault the president at all.
Yeah, and so what happens next, in your opinion? And again, I think the sad part is that we have certain people, Republicans and Democrats, who immediately, reflexively come out and decide their biggest problem is with the president and his language, as opposed to the reality that we face with North Korea and its setting its sights and its threats.
Well, I know Senator McCain, who's in a fight, and there are lots of reasons to admire John McCain, and I do, but it's only a couple of months ago that he referred to this guy as the crazy fat kid that runs North Korea. Not probably a person who should be talking about temperate language. And by the way, this young guy is not crazy, but we don't believe, but he is reckless.
Yes.
and trying to establish maybe his control of that country in a way that says, look, I'm not near as old as my dad was or my grandfather was when he was in charge, but I'm every bit as tough as they are, and don't assume I'm not. But it's I think it's important not to take things off the table. Presidents over the years who've been most successful in foreign policy, like Reagan and Eisenhower, never took things off the table. Now, they didn't speak in that exact language, but they both always made it clear that the United States would do whatever the United States needed to do. And in his own way, I think that's exactly what the president's doing, while others like Rex Tillerson and at the UN and other places we work these other channels, they should not assume that we're going to continue to let them do whatever they want to do and then try to blackmail us out of what they might do.
Right. Senator Blunt, you voted in the affirmative on the repeal and replace bill that was before the Senate. And there's some talk that that actually could come back in a different formulation when you all return after the break. What's your take on what will happen there? And are you ready to go ahead and vote on just a separate full repeal bill?
Well, I did, actually. We had 3 votes. One was repeal and replace. And
right.
The replace wasn't as everything I would have wanted it to be, but better than where we are now. One was repeal, and you have 2 years to come up with a replacement. I voted for that. And then one was just to eliminate, the one that got closest was to eliminate the most offensive parts of the Obama plan, which was the mandate that told you you had to do something that the Supreme Court only upheld on the basis that the penalty was a tax, not a penalty. So that's the one that got 49 votes. Unlike a business in the Senate, you don't hire the people you work for, nor can you fire them, and they have to explain what they did at home. But I'm willing to do that. I'm also willing to be very encouraging of Tom Price, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, who is now into a process he's assured me that they will complete, where they're going to look at their 1,446 places in the Obamacare law where it says some federal agency, almost always Health and Human Services, will really define what this means. And so step one now may be Tom Price going in, and his goal in those 1,446 places is, can we do this in a way that's more economical, creates more access for families, and creates access to health care instead of just an insurance policy that's got a deductible so high you're never going to use it.
Right. Well, I appreciate, and so do all of us appreciate the hard work you've done up there. It's been very frustrating watching just a few people muddling things up, and you've been talking about this end around regarding the cabinet and Secretary Price for a long time now. And
we thought that was going to be step 2. We thought step 1 would be what 50 Republicans and the vice president could do. Step 2 would be what Tom Price could do. Step 3 would be things that would take more than 50 senators, that would do things like create associated health plans and buying across state lines. And the best place to get insurance is still in a group, whether that's a group at work or a group that we could figure out how to create. That is still by far the best place to get insurance, and that's the kind of thing we ought to be focused on.
Well, and you were pushing for that
20
even
years
when
ago.
you were in the House.
Exactly.
I mean, and nobody was listening at that time. You and Senator Talent were part of that, even when he was in the House. All right, we come back, and you stick around for a second. We come back and talk about tax reform?
Yes.
Sounds great. Senator Roy Blunt.
97.1 News Time, 8:19. It's 60.